By their nature, video games aren't particularly sympathetic. You're supposed to be creating enjoyable encounters for the player rather than something that's going to linger with them for a little while after. You're supposed to hate the bad guy, not yourself. You should know that most video games are very similar. Despite creative tweaking or artistic liberties, you can break down almost any video game into some protagonist encountering problems that require a journey, with boss fights providing a physical representation of this conflict as well as being an opportunity to test your skills. Basically, slay bosses and find the kind of satisfaction that is otherwise unattainable in real life. Ruin this sanctity at your peril. There's something so very wrong about getting to the end of a boss fight and feeling remorse for your actions. It goes against everything I learned from playing video games growing up, but I still kind of like it. You know, sometimes you need games to challenge your perception of what you're doing and have you second guess everything you do. Or just provide a cheap emotional moment at your expense. These days, I'll take either, no questions asked. So I think it's important to go back to the title of this video periodically and remembering that some bosses don't have to die. Like, could we still have a video game if Bowser wasn't drowning in lava at the end of a Mario game? Probably not, it would kind of undermine most of what anyone's doing. What's the point in showing up if Bowser isn't burning to a crisp at the end of it? However, some boss fights do feel a little unnecessary, but most of the time it fits with what the video game is going for at the time, even if it hurts to go through with it. If it's orchestrated by the main villain, that works pretty well, because he's supposed to be a dick. It's a tried and tested trope within a video game to put you up against a corrupted ally, where suddenly things get way more personal than at any point in the game. You're not fighting like a random dragon or something, you're fighting a party member or another important character in the game that you have some kind of connection to. It might come across as a bit of cheap emotional exploitation, but damn, it is effective. One of my favourite aspects of the first two Borderlands games is that characters who were playable in the first game became important allies in the second. This was doubly awesome if you played as, say, Mordecai in Borderlands 1, since he's back in Borderlands 2 with his bird Bloodwing, continuing to be this cool hunter guy who helps you out from time to time. This game also has Handsome Jack in it, whose suave demeanour makes him one of the more enjoyable villains to listen to, as he spends most of the game telling you how insignificant you are. But he's not threatening, is he? What he needs to do is kidnap Bloodwing, fill her full of some funky mutating liquid that makes her huge and powerful, and make her a boss fight. No, hang on. What starts out as a rescue mission of Mordecai's bird quickly goes off the deep end after the boss fight, as Handsome Jack blows Bloodwing's head off with some explosives. And that's real sad and everything, but it might also be the best boss fight in the game. Handsome Jack's corruption of Bloodwing gives her 4 different elemental forms, and it's quite a lot of fun to have to adapt to changing attacks all throughout the fight. No other battle in the game comes close, but also, you know, Bloodwing dies and she was useful in the first game, so yeah. Shame, I kinda liked Handsome Jack. Then he started killing people. Optional boss fights sure are a thing. For ages I never played a game that set aside some fights for the enterprising player who wanted the extra challenge, or maybe for the sadistic player who wanted to find conflict in a peaceful scenario. Like, the dust is settling and everyone's getting along with each other, only for the protagonist to swing in like, hey, where the party at? I need something to kill. You know, I'm a big fan of free choice, and if you want to be a heartless dick, then yeah, all power to you. But if you went back at the end of Skyrim and thought, hey, do you know who I haven't killed yet? That Yoda guy at the top of that mountain. Just don't talk to me or my son ever again. So some plot happens in Skyrim, which means that lots of dragons need to die for various reasons, which is fair enough really, considering that all of the promotion surrounding Skyrim was fuck the dragons, but it takes a certain type of cold individual to go out of their way to kill the one dragon who is kind of a cool guy. Paarthurnax resides on the top of the tallest mountain in the game and helps you fight other more evil dragons by teaching you how the voice works and other groovy shit. It's kind of like finding a wise old reformed Metroid in Metroid who wants to help you out. They'd probably have something interesting to teach you. You'd also have some people who'd want this sage character dead, and in Skyrim, these people are the Blades, who got you into the main quest line in the first place and once gave you a cool looking sword. But it's a quest you can do where you march up to Paarthurnax and cut him down like any other dragon in the game, but without any kind of special reward to it. It's like killing a recovering alcoholic because they once did a bad thing. A little mercy goes a long way. Killing Paarthurnax is one of those events in most Bethesda games where your decision to go through with it or to back out of it will affect which factions hate you from that point onwards. You spare Paarthurnax and the Blades hate you. You kill Paarthurnax and it's the Greybeards who won't talk to you again. And I prefer the Greybeards and also Paarthurnax because Paarthurnax is voiced by Charles Martinet, the voice of Mario. You shouldn't stab Mario. Few games make you feel bad for killing people than Fire Emblem, weirdly enough. I spent a decent amount of time recently trying to work out why, and I think it comes down to giving your opponents a personality to latch onto. Most of the time when you're not fighting a final boss that turns into a dragon for some reason, you'll be facing someone who you can recruit if you talk to them in the right way. This is something you see a lot of in older Fire Emblem games, but not necessarily in a game like Fire Emblem Awakening. For some, that'll sound like fuel to the fire that Awakening ruined Fire Emblem rather than what it actually did, which is save it. Certainly the early parts of Awakening are a little bland as they try to ease new players into this kind of game, but hot damn! It doesn't take long to catch a light. So the death of Emeryn affects the good guys in a pretty bad way, which is to be expected since she's well loved and was just trying to piece together a conflict started by people who are like, LOL, let's start a war! Basically North Korea, but a bit more flamboyant. You're thrown into a fight almost immediately after Emeryn's death with everyone somewhere on the recovery spectrum, which in of itself is an awesomely memorable setup, but maybe the best part is that the bad guys aren't so keen either. I mean, they'll stick their weapons where you don't want them to be stuck, but it's constantly being interrupted and prefaced by these soldiers and their leader Mustafa questioning their roles off the back of Emeryn's sacrifice. Mustafa allows his own men to flee if they don't want to fight, which, considering that every other bad guy you fought up until this point has been kind of an asshole, is so emotionally jarring at a time where emotions are already running pretty high. Shit, when Mustafa talks about understanding what Crom and Co are going through and how he would protect them the best he could if they surrendered, like, what a guy! Before you were fighting hordes of zombies and now, the complete opposite. Even Metal Gear never tried something like this. Defeating bosses in video games feels natural because you've been taught to do it by basically every video game out there. You can approach conflict with violence and holy shit, it kinda works out in the end. But can you solve problems without fighting everything in sight? Probably, but, you know, what are the chances of that? There follows the logic that if you teach a player to do something from the start, they'll continue on in that fashion until told otherwise by circumstances or instinct. The opening minutes of Undertale attempt to convince you that everything you've learned from other RPGs simply doesn't apply here, and conflict can be negotiated through means other than slicing and dicing. On the first playthrough, you're very unlikely to follow this exactly unless you know something's up, so some monsters will die while others survive, and it's all a bit messy. The only way of sparing some of these monsters is to say and do the right thing instead of attacking, with later enemies and boss fights making things way more complicated. And Undertale throws you a doozy before you leave the first area. Toriel doesn't want you to leave because the world outside is full of problems, so she tries to stop you with force. What followed on my first playthrough was one of the most awkward boss fights I've ever experienced, as you frantically scour the battle menus for some way through that doesn't involve hurting the one character who kind of likes you. In the end, most people settle for a wild Pokemon style of weakening Toriel by slowly chipping away at her health and hoping that it'll be enough to deter her. This is clearly what the game expects you to do, because just as you get to a point where she's running out of health but still has enough to survive a few more hits, suddenly one of your hits does way more damage than normal and abruptly kills Toriel. And shit, I was alright with killing frogs and vegetables, but defeating Toriel sets a bad precedent of what can be done in this game. Other games have made it so you can kill the main characters if you're so inclined, but not many of them have been turn-based RPGs. You will respect a game more if you're able to kill the only friend you've made at this point. Player choice will be the end of you. If you're on the right high horse and feeling particularly artsy, a video about boss fights where you feel a certain amount of remorse and regret for your actions should bring you at the front door of Shadow of the Colossus. This game is a bit of a slow burner that takes a while to show its true nature, but gradually over time you come to accept that all of your actions carry heavy consequences, and you feel like shit for killing all of these majestic creatures. But do you really? I mean, yeah, some of the Colossi are graceful works of art, but others are absolute assholes. You think of the game as a whole as a collection of bosses that you regret defeating, like, not this guy, he's a murderous bastard. Also the small Colossi? I'd rather shove glass in my eyes. Those motherfuckers deserve to die. Not every Colossus is born equal though. They might die the same, but some of them feel less like boss fights and more like genocide. Not so much at the start of the game, because you're still riding this wave of adrenaline as the music swells to some awesome peak while you're hanging off beards and this horse's dreadlocks, which actually gets you through a fight like Avion. This bird won't directly fight you, but my god, you're hanging on for dear life upside down over a lake, and I love this game. To experience a properly depressing boss fight, you've got to wait until Colossus number 13, and this giant flying sandworm called Phalanx. Same basic concept as Avian, as you chase it down, leap on it, and try and get shit done a mile up in the air, but something's a little off about it. I see Phalanx as the true tipping point between, "Ah yeah, I love killing these monsters," to, maybe I've done a bad thing. Phalanx is the only Colossus in the whole game who not only doesn't engage you, but doesn't even know you're there most of the time. There's this really impressive dissonance between the fight itself, where this powerful music is driving you to climb all over this creature and stab those weak points, but then you have to watch it die. This is usually the sobering moment after every other Colossus, but here, you've got 26 seconds, the most of any fight in the game, to watch Phalanx slump to the ground in defeat. And before this fight, you may have had a few suspicions that you might be the bad guy, but here, it's clear as day. No amount of incredible music can cover that up. Phalanx did nothing wrong. This is RabbidLuigi, and it's easy to see Shadow of the Colossus as a subversion of a lot of different tropes in video games, but I think one of the more interesting ones is what a protagonist would do to save a damsel in distress. Usually it's just shoot a bunch of bad guys or stomp some turtles, but here you see the consequences of every single action you take. Phalanx dying is like a building toppling over, but, you know, a nice building, like, I don't know, a school or something, I don't know. Have you got an idea that you'd like me to turn into a countdown? Let me know in a comment down below, and make sure you check out my Twitter, where I'll be turning the best submissions into a poll where you can then decide the best topic. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.